Inshallah, from the heart, from that loving awareness, we will use the opening lines of the Mathnawi as our morning meditation. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Maulana says, listen to the reed how it tells a tale, complaining of separations, saying, ever since I was parted from the reed bed, my lament has caused man and woman to moan. I want a bosom torn by severance, that I may unfold the pain of this loving yearning. Everyone who is left far from his source wishes back the time when he was united with it. In every company I uttered my grieving cry. I consorted with the unhappy and with those that rejoice. Everyone became my friend from his own opinion. None sought out the secrets from within me. My secret is not far from my complaint, but ear and eye lack the light. Body is not veiled from soul, nor soul from body, yet none is permitted to see the soul. The sound of the reed is fire, not wind. Whoever has not this fire, may he be nothing. It is the fire of love that is in the reed. It is the fervor of love that is in the wine. The reed is the comrade of everyone who has been parted from a friend. Its strains pierced our hearts. Whoever saw a poison and an antidote like the reed, whoever saw a sympathizer and longing lover like the reed tells of the way full of blood and recounts stories of the passion of Majnun. Only to the senseless is this sense confided. The tongue has no customer save the ear. In our woe, the days have become untimely. Our days travel hand in hand with burning griefs. If our days are gone, let them go. It is no matter, as long as you remain, for none is holy as you are. Whoever is not a fish becomes sated with water. Whoever is without daily bread finds the day long. None that is raw understands the state of the ripe. Therefore my words must be brief. Farewell. So these are the opening 18 lines of the Mathnawi, which stands in relation to the broader poem, like the Fatiha stands in relation to the Quran, and really summarizes and gives the essence. Now, there's so much that could be reflected upon, but one of the beautiful things here is that Rumi is emphasizing that, like the reed, we have to become empty. And like the reed, we have to yearn for return. As long as we're content here and satisfied here, we will never take the path to something higher. And there isn't something wrong with you if you feel malcontent in this world. Because we're not made for this world, we're made for that which transcends this world. And so that yearning, that desire, that shauq is a means of transformation. It is a means to set out on the path. Rumi mentions that the sound of the reed is fire, not wind. And he's speaking about the fire of love. Of course, for the Sufis, Sufism is the way of love. It's the path of love. But love is not a wishy-washy emotion or sentiment. Love is the ground of being. And love is an ocean without shore. In fact, the Sufis say, if you care for your life, run away from love, because it will take everything. It will take everything. Don't think love is something gentle and sweet. Rumi says, love envelops the 7 seas like they were straw. Love will take us and envelop us and extinguish us and annihilate us. But then Rumi says, whoever becomes drowned in the ocean of love wants to be more drowned. So this is what we all yearn for. And he said, it's the fire of love that's in the reed. That sound is its love of returning. And then he says it's the fervor of love that's in the wine. He's getting at it's what ferments the wine, the grape to make wine is love. Of course, the Sufis use the image of wine very commonly. And this is because wine is something that overrides the intellect. It overrides the intellect. And it causes one to lose a type of self-awareness or lose inhibition. And of course, in the sacred law, the outward wine is forbidden to drink. Because of that fact, because the intellect is sacred. And so anything that obscures or damages or harms the intellect, and here intellect we're really meaning the consciousness itself, is forbidden because the intellect is a sacred gift. But there is something which is beyond the intellect. It's not below the intellect, but it's, you could say, supra-rational. It transcends the rational, and that is love. And so the Sufis will speak about love as, or drunkenness, as the experience of transcending our individuated selfhood, our separate selfhood, in the state of experiencing the divine. And so the Sufis, somewhat scandalously, they call Allah as-saqi, the bartender. I'm in love with the bartender. That's really what Sufi poetry is all about. And that is because the experience of having your heart open to the divine presence is intoxicating. And it causes one to actually lose the sense of separate, individuated I. Me, I. You become appearing outwardly as someone who's drunk. You become unaware like someone who's drunk. And Rumi says, he says, in our madhab, in our way, it is forbidden not to drink the wine. Of course, he's talking about this higher wine of ma'rifah, of experiential knowledge of God. And the Sufis say, and it rhymes, it's beautiful in Arabic, asaqi baqi. The one who poured before is pouring more. So there's a sense that Allah is always granting openings. Allah is always pouring, but the ones that receive are only those whose cups are prepared to receive. And if Allah is the cupbearer or the bartender, the cup is your heart. Each one of us has a cup, and that cup is the heart. But not all cups are prepared to receive what is being poured. And Imam Ghazali is very systematic in his writings, Allah be pleased with him. He talks about the various reasons why a cup wouldn't receive. And he said the first one is because it's upside down. No matter what you pour in a cup that's upside down, it's not going to get any liquid. And so if we're focused on this world and buying and selling and amassing and reputation and fame and he said, she said, and all the things that the ego becomes obsessed with, no matter what's poured, we're not going to receive. So the first thing is to turn your cup upside down. And what do we do when we pray? We turn our cup up. We ask to receive. But being receptive, being turned up, is not just an outward thing, it's actually an inward state. It's a state of being receptive and open to the divine presence. And there is a reciprocity that is a mystery in this. And that's why Allah says, "Ana 'inda dhanna 'abdi bi." I am in the opinion or the perspective of my servant. Right? There's a way that we relate to Allah that determines how Allah relates to us. And then the hadith goes that whoever takes a step to me, I lunge to them. And whoever comes to me walking, I come to them running. And whoever reaches their hand to me, I reach my wingspan to greet them. So this is what we first have to do, is turn our beings to Allah. And this is not just 5 times a day. Right? Rumi says that for the one whose prayer niche is the beloved, that they're not happy with just praying 5 times a day. Right? We know this is the prayer niche, right? The mihrab. But if we're always contemplating the divine, فَأَيْنَمَا تَوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهَ اللَّهِ, the Quran says, wheresoever you turn, there is the face of God, the essence of God. And so for the ones that are seeking the divine beloved, they're not sufficed with 5 times a day. Every moment is prayerfulness. Every moment is prayerfulness. The popular version that is translated is that, and actually, Zion, you mentioned this when we came to the farm, that there are 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground, which is very beautiful in English, but the actual meaning in Persian is even more beautiful for those that understand the symbolism. He says, for those whose prayer niche is the beauty of the beloved, there are 1,000 ways to make ruku and sajda. Right? Ruku is the bowing in prayer, and sajda is the prostration in prayer. And so the goal is to have a heart in a state of permanent surrender and permanent prostration. And all of these outward movements of the body are just to bring us into that state, inshallah. So that's the first thing. But then, if our cup is up, the next thing we have to do is make sure our cup is empty. If someone is pouring, you have to make sure you have an empty cup, not a full cup, otherwise you're not going to receive. And this is related to this emptying of our selfishness and of our ego, and especially of the ego's qualities, which are envisioned as a type of dirt that is in the cup. Right? Because even if pure liquid is poured in a dirty cup, you wouldn't want to drink that. So we have to first, before we receive, cleanse the cup. And these are the traits that we all know, the vices such as arrogance, such as stinginess, such as harshness, harsh-heartedness, such as being filled with anger and rancor and jealousy. These traits that if we have them in our heart, they pollute our heart and they corrupt our heart. And this is important not only because this affects our spiritual state, but it impacts everything that we perceive and everything we say and everything we do. Because we don't see with our eyes, we see through our eyes. We see with our heart. The state of our awareness and consciousness is what we see through. The eye is an instrument through which our awareness sees. And the Quran says very clearly, they have hearts, but they have eyes, but their eyes are blind. No, it is the hearts that are blind. The hearts that are blind. So may our hearts see, inshallah. So this is what Rumi's really getting at. May our hearts be open, inshallah. There's much more that could be said. He mentions that the reed tells the stories of the passion of Majnun. Most of you know the story of Majnun Layla. This is the epic love story in the Islamic world that is like the Romeo and Juliet of the Muslim world. And the story is about someone named Qais who fell in love with Layla. And they were both in love with each other, but like any good love story, they couldn't be together. They couldn't be together. And Layla's father had betrothed her to someone else. She was going to be married off to someone else. So even though she loved Qais, she couldn't be with him. And so Qais, even though he couldn't be with Layla, he remained loyal to her. He was so full of love that he would wander the streets and the deserts chanting Layla's name and invoking Layla's name. And they saw him once kissing a wall in the town, and they say, "What are you doing?" He said, "I once saw Layla lean against this wall." And they saw him following this black dog around the city, and they said, "What are you doing?" He said, "This dog, its hair reminds me of Layla's hair." And so he's the true lover. And so, of course, to other people, this appeared crazy. And so they named him Majnun, which means crazy, the madman. So this actually was a pre-Islamic story, but the Sufis, very beautifully, they saw in this story a profound spiritual lesson and symbolism, that we should all be like Majnun for the Divine Beloved. And Layla means night in Arabic. And so the day is the time of multiplicity. We say all the forms. But the night is the time of unity. Forms hide. And so it indicates divine unity. And also Layla represents darkness. And of course, in the metaphysics of the Sufis, Allah is light. And they talk about that the highest levels of realization is that the light is so intense that it's black. It's black. It's so intense that it's black. So this Layla represents the divine reality and the divine light. So we should all be like this. May we be like Majnun. And there are many beautiful stories about Majnun. And one of my favorites that I like to tell is that all of the town was invited to Layla's home for a banquet. Her family had a celebration. And so everyone came. And there was a buffet. And Layla was serving everyone who came. And so Majnun shows up. And he gets in line. And every step closer, he becomes more on the verge of ecstasy because he's taking a step closer to Layla. And finally, it's his turn, and he gives her the plate. And she takes his plate, and she throws it against the wall, shatters it. And so all the people are like, and Majnun jumps for joy. In ecstasy. And everyone is like, he really is Majnun. Like, look at how she rejects him and look at how he responds. And he just looks at them and he smiles and he says, "No, now I get to go back in line." And so the teaching here is that everyone asks from Allah. But very few people ask for Allah. Oh Allah, give me this, give me that. But very few people ask for Allah. And the Sufis seek Allah alone. The great Rabi al-Adawiyya, one of the great masters of love, she was known to say that she had a line of poetry where she said, "Oh Allah, if I worship you for your paradise, then bar its gates from me. And if I worship you for fear of hell, in hell leave me be. But if I worship you for you alone, unveil yourself to me." And this is a high maqam. This is a high maqam. And there's a apocryphal story that once they saw her with a brand of fire and a bucket walking through the city very purposefully. And they said, "Where are you going, Ya Rabia?" She said, "I'm going to light the garden on fire. And I'm going to extinguish the fires of hell so that people will stop worshiping Allah for something created." Even the garden and the fire are creatures. Now, alhamdulillah, there's an adab, and the Prophet taught us to ask for these things. There's nothing wrong with it. But even the people that purely seek Allah, they ask for protection from the fire, and they ask for the garden out of adab with Allah, but really all they seek is Allah. So may we be like that, inshallah. Now, but of course, one of the secrets of Layla smashing the plate is because she wanted Majnun to come back in line. She loved him too. And oftentimes it is the case, is it not, that we will have our plans and our plots foiled. And we will have things happen to us that we would never choose for ourselves. And we will have trial and tribulation manifest in our life. But if we look back on our life, we see that those were the most important experiences of our life. And that was the true growth. That was the true means for us to grow spiritually. And so, though we never ask for tribulation or hardship, we ask for gentleness and ease. The Prophet taught us to ask for gentleness and ease. But when difficulty comes, we see that as a gift from Allah to draw near. And Rumi's poetry is full of this. So he says, if you're irritated with every rub, how will your mirror ever become polished? This is another image that the Sufis use. Of course, the Prophet ﷺ gave us this image that everything has a polish. And the polish of the heart is dhikrullah, is remembrance of God. The heart, it oxidizes, it becomes covered, it becomes dirty with the world. But through remembrance, through invocation, it becomes pure. But also, if we have proper relationship to the difficulties and trials and tribulations in our life, it will be a means for our elevation and our purification. In fact, one of our teachers, our dear friend, one of them passed away. Our beloved brother, Sidi Osama Cannon, Allah yarhamuhu, some of you knew him. And he had ALS. And he, mashallah, was a great tribulation, and he passed away. One of our teachers, Sheikh Muhammad Jilani, he said of him, there were things that there were levels of realization he attained through that illness that he never could have attained through acts of worship. And so the Sufis seek adab with Allah in every state. May Allah not try us with difficulty. But of course, all the stories of the Quran, they're full of trials and tribulation. There's a beautiful book called Trial and Tribulation in the Quran, which deals with this subject, by a scholar, Iranian woman. I think her name is Nazarene. I forget her name now, but it's called Trials and Tribulation in the Quran. If you're interested in the subject, it's a very good book. And she points out that all the stories of the prophets in the Quran are stories of trial and tribulation. Right? Even the story of Yusuf in the beginning, it says this is the most beautiful story ever told. And then what? His brothers try to kill him. They throw him down a well. Then he's taken into slavery. Then he's sold. Then his master's wife seduces him, and he gets framed for seducing her. And then he gets thrown in prison. And right, you might think, if this happened to you, how is this the most beautiful story ever told? It's a terrible story, right? There's a wisdom in that. There's a secret in that, which is that this world is the place that we come to develop our spirit. This is the university of life. And if we're searching for a perfect happiness, perfect fit, perfect pleasure in this world, we are in for heartbreak. Heartbreak. But if we orient towards this world as the opportunity that Allah is giving us to awaken, then all of those experiences will be experienced very differently. That doesn't mean we won't experience pain or difficulty or tribulation, but it means we will reorient our relationship to those things. Don't think that the saints and the prophets don't have hardship. No, but they have a different relationship to difficulty and hardship. And, those that take their physical health and strength and weightlifting seriously, right? They go to the gym and they feel the burn when they're lifting and they love it. That's their favorite part, the pain, right? Because they know they're growing, they're developing. Were they not to feel that, something wouldn't feel right, right? Likewise, spiritually, that it is through, and actually riyada, which now it means sports in modern Arabic, but traditionally the Sufis would use it as like spiritual training, right? Riyadat an-nafs, training the self, training the soul. All of these disciplines, even, right, all of the great spiritual paths, they impose difficulty on themselves even when there's time of abundance, right? So it's like eating less even when you have food, fasting. Sleeping less even when you could sleep in, right? Giving away things even when you have abundance. It's imposing these difficulties. Putting yourself in silence and solitude and sleeplessness and periods of invocation. Why? Because there's a sense that just as the body becomes stronger through resistance and putting it through difficulty, the soul is trained through disciplining it in this way. And may Allah be gentle with us and give us adab with Him in every state. Inshallah. Ameen. It's very different than the prosperity gospel, right? This idea that, right, if Allah loves you, He'll give you abundance. The prophets taught the opposite. The prophet said, those tried most are the prophets, and then those nearest to them. Right? So this is an orientation to difficulty. And Rumi, being a great poet, he sees this teaching everywhere. Right? So he even talks about the chickpea. Right? It starts off hard. Then you put it in the pot and it boils, but it wants to jump out of the pot. It doesn't want to be boiled. But the cook takes the ladle, get back in the pot. So he's saying it's like that. Allah is putting us in hot water so that we will soften, so that we will cook. And Rumi said of his own life that it could be summed up in 3 stages. He said, I was raw, I cooked, I burned. And the rawness is our spiritual state before we go through the spiritual path. The cooking is the spiritual path, the spiritual practice. All this prayer and fasting and invocation and discipline. And then the burning is when we become completely enveloped in the fire and completely cooked. And that is the fire of love. May we be cooked, inshallah. And this leads us to this. Rumi says, whoever is not a fish becomes sated with his water. This is another image that he uses throughout, which is that every animal needs water to live. The sparrow takes a little bit. The cat takes a little bit more. The dog takes a little bit more. The horse takes a lot more. The camel takes a lot more. The elephant takes the most. But everyone needs their water, and then they became satiated and they can't take water anymore, except for the fish. The fish never becomes satiated. In fact, were you to take the fish out of water, it wouldn't want to live anymore. And so Rumi uses this because the water represents divine knowledge, divine unity, the ocean without shore. And so we all take a little bit, but then we become satiated. And so this is like dhikr, right? We do a little bit of dhikr, and then we become like, it's too much now, I need to go watch Netflix, right? We become like satiated. But you can develop your spiritual capacity so that you can drink. Maybe now you're just a sparrow, but eventually you can become like a camel. You can take a lot. And so then you make a lot of dhikr. But the goal is to be a fish. And who are the fish? The prophets and the saints, the awliya. They never leave dhikr. They never leave dhikr. They become swimming in the ocean of divine unity all the time. And Rumi has a very funny line, funny image. He said there was a man being chased by hornets, wasps. And he runs and they're stinging him, so he starts stripping off all his clothes as he's going, and they keep stinging him. So then he just jumps in the water. And then while he's underwater, they're not stinging him. It's like, alhamdulillah. But then he has to come up for air. So he comes up for air, they start stinging him on his face, so then he keeps going down. So then he has to keep coming up. So Rumi said, what is this? He says, these hornets and wasps that are stinging us, these are the thoughts of this or that, or he said, or she said, or do they like me, or am I good enough, or am I, right? All of the nafs, this people say now negative self-talk, right? In Arabic it's called khawatir, these promptings that come to us, that distract us, and that ultimately are from our lower self. Isn't it true that we're being stung by them all the time? We suffer much more in our minds than in reality, right? You could be happy and everything's fine outside, but inside you're suffering and going through this, even a story of what might happen that hasn't happened. We're being tormented by it, right? Or something that happened and you're free of now, but you're still tormented by it. La ilaha illallah. So what is the water? It's dhikrullah. That when we enter into this state of remembrance, that becomes our predominant focus, and those negative thoughts stop, and we stop being stung. But at first, our lung capacity is not very good. So we have to go back up for air, and then we get stung again. But eventually, we can develop our lung capacity so that we can stay underwater forever. And anyone who's been to the Emirates, it wasn't always like that with the tall buildings. Actually, just a couple generations ago, it was barefoot, destitute Bedouin. And what was their livelihood? Pearl diving. And they had no technology. They didn't have like air tanks or anything like this. They would free dive. But they would develop the capacity to stay underwater for long periods of time, 10 minutes, without breathing. This is possible for the human lung capacity. And they would find the pearls, and that was their income. So likewise, spiritually, we can develop our spiritual lung capacity. Don't think, I'm weak, it's hard for me to do dhikr, it's hard for me to wake up for fajr. Don't think of it like that. Think of this as the method. This is the practice. Just like you get stronger, don't think, oh, I'm so weak, I can only lift a little bit of weight. No, lift what you can, and through consistency, you'll find yourself very strong very fast. Likewise with dhikr. If we're consistent, we'll develop very fast. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said the best actions, the best ibadah, the best worship is that which is done consistently, even if it's a little bit. And this is the same with physical exercise. You can't go to the gym and then just lift everything and then take a month off. If you go just for a few minutes a day, but you're consistent, you'll get strong. It's like that with our spiritual discipline as well. And of course, since we mentioned the destitute barefoot Bedouins, the Prophet ﷺ told us 1400 years ago that one of the signs of the end of time is that the destitute barefoot Bedouins will compete in building tall buildings. Sadaqa Rasulullah. The Prophet speaks the truth. So we can become like water. Actually, there's a line, he says that the awliya, they become like water. They become water, so that even when they're far from water, they are water. Which, I'm from Seattle, so Bruce Lee said, be like water. It's like that. Be like water. That every cell of your body starts to resonate with divine remembrance. And that even if you're not outwardly making dhikr, your whole being is making dhikr. And it's not far-fetched that can be your state. So may that be our state. And then he says, none that is raw understands the state of the ripe. Therefore, my words must be brief. Farewell. Right? So again, only those who have advanced on this path can understand what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to say a little bit. This is the introduction. But what's really important to understand for the framework of the Mathnawi is that Rumi has written this book as a manual of spiritual discipline to take us through the stages of self-realization into the divine presence. And even though it appears this story, that story, and it appears on the surface that there's no structure or organization, it is masterfully organized. There's an architecture to it. And in fact, this poem the order that was founded on Rumi's teachings, the Mevlevi order, which is founded here, and we'll meet with some of the great Mevlevis here. The spiritual training and discipline of that order is through this poem. And you would be taken through various levels of this poem, and it's 25,000 lines, so it could take a long time to study. But you would be taken through it 7 times to gain full mastery. And the first time you would be given 1 level of commentary. And then you would start over again and given a 2nd level of commentary. And then you would start over again and be given a 3rd level of commentary until the 7th level. And then you would be a Mathnawi Khan, a master of the Mathnawi. And then you would get the white turban. In the order, the green was the norm, but the white was for those that were the masters of the Mathnawi. And so, of course, we can't go through all 25,000 lines. It's 6 books. But we will do our best to at least summarize the first book in this week and tell a number of the discourses and stories from it. The important thing to understand is that Rumi wrote the Mathnawi to be a mirror. It is a mirror. And it is showing us our inner states and our inner reality. And every story in the Mathnawi, in fact, every character in every story is an aspect of the human being. Right? So it's told symbolically. Sometimes it'll be about a lion and a hare. Sometimes it'll be about Joseph and his friends. Sometimes it will be about the chickpea or this. But it's all about aspects of ourself. And so, inshallah, our reading, we will strive to understand ourselves through this blessed book. So that is the first 18. But what I wanted to do now is read the rest of the introduction, and then I'm going to summarize the first discourse, and then we have a special occasion, inshallah, that we'll not tell you now. It'll be a surprise, but inshallah. So the remainder of the introduction is like this. O son, break your chains and be free. How long will you be a slave to silver and gold? If you pour the sea into a pitcher, how much will it hold? Only 1 day's store. The pitcher, the eye of the covetous, never becomes full. The oyster shell is not filled with pearls until it is contented. He whose garment is rent by love is purged of covetousness and all defect. Hail, O love that brings us good gain. Love is the physician of all our ills. It is the remedy of our pride and our vanity, our Plato and our Galen. Through love, the earthly body soared to the skies. The mountain began to dance and became nimble. Love inspired Mount Sinai, O lover. Sinai drunk, and Moses fell in a swoon. Were I joined to the lip of one in accord with me, I too, like the reed, would tell all that may be told. Whoever is parted from one who speaks his language becomes silent, even if he has 100 songs. When the rose is gone and the garden faded, you will hear no more the nightingale's story. The beloved is all, the lover but a veil. The beloved is living, and the lover a dead thing. When love has no care for him, he is left as a bird without wings. Alas for him then. How should I have consciousness before or behind when the light of my beloved is not before me and behind? Love wills that this word should be shown forth. If the mirror does not reflect, how is that? Do you know why the mirror reflects nothing? It is because the rust is not cleared from its face. Oh, my friends, listen to this tale. In truth, it is the very essence of our inward state. So this is how he begins, and this is the introduction to the first discourse and the first story, which we'll summarize because it's about 400, 500 lines, so we can't read it all. But just to say a couple things about this, Rumi begins here by saying, burst your chains and be free. How long will you be a slave of silver and gold? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, two people are never sated. The one who seeks the dunya and the one who seeks knowledge. And in another narration, he said, were the child of Adam to have a valley of gold, he would not be happy, but he would want another valley. And nothing will fill his mouth except dirt, meaning when he's buried. So this almost this appetite, right? Nothing will fill his mouth but dirt. It's a powerful image. And so we understand that as human beings, we yearn for the infinite. We yearn for the infinite. But it is a grave mistake to try to fulfill that desire with the finite. Nothing in this world will fill us. We keep thinking, right, maybe if I buy another pair of shoes, okay, the next pair of shoes, I'll be happy. Not this one, okay, I think then the next one will make me happy. No, the next one. It never works. Nothing will fill our desire for the infinite but the infinite. And so Rumi is saying, let go of this. Silver and gold represent anything in this world that we yearn for. But it actually is a beautiful thing that we yearn for the infinite, because Allah is the infinite and the absolute. We just have to, right, not have misplaced love. An essence of this way, first of all, love is the essence of this way. Love is the essence of what Rumi's getting at. It is the thing that heals us. It is the thing that frees us in covetousness, right? There are emphases in different Sufi paths and different spiritual paths and traditions have this. Some, it's more ascetic practice, right? Very hardcore discipline and practice and silence and going into the mountaintop seclusion for decades and taking monastic vows. And the Sufis and Rumi, of course, they have ascetic practices. But Rumi emphasized that love is much more effective than even that. And those practices support it, but that love should be the essence of everything. Love will purify us of everything. And he gets into the way that through love we can come to understand the true beloved. So then he says very beautifully that through love the earthly body soars to the skies. What is he speaking about? The Isra wa Mi'raj. The Prophet brought into the divine presence through love. And then he says, and the mountain began to dance and became nimble. This is the story, of course, of Moses, where he asks, "Oh Allah, I want to see you." And Allah says, "You can't bear it. But I will have my tajalli, my theophany, my manifestation onto the mountain. And if you can bear it, you'll see it." And so he looked, and this divine tajalli, theophany, came to the mountain, and the mountain was rent asunder, and Moses fell unconscious. Right? This is told in the Quran. So Rumi is saying that the essence of what the prophets brought is love. They experienced an experience of love from the divine reality, the divine beloved, and then they brought this to those that would listen. Then he says, where I join to the lip of one in accord with me, I too, like the reed, would tell all that may be told. Very beautifully, right? So he's he's giving this image that the lip of the reed and his lips meet and the song comes. He said, but you have to be like a reed for my words to impact you. You have to empty yourself. Otherwise, my words won't pass through. Then he says again, the beloved is all, the lover a veil. The beloved is living and the lover a dead thing. Of course, this gets to a profound metaphysical teaching that in reality, everything is a mirror reflecting the divine reality. everything in existence is a sign. It is an ayah. It is a surah, but it has a ma'na. One of the key themes is surah and ma'na. And Romeo, we were talking about this, that the word surah, of course, it means a chapter in the Quran. But surah, Romeo very beautifully pointed out, surah is like the walls of a city in its etymology, right? It's like a citadel. So it's that which contains and protects. And so the surah contains meaning. And so Rumi uses surah as form and ma'na as inner meaning. So we all have a surah and ma'na. We have a shell, but then we have the seed. So he's saying we have to get past the shell of things. Just get past the surah and go to the ma'na. And if we were to see things with the eye of reality, we would see the divine reality everywhere. فَأَيْنَمَا تَوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهَ اللَّهِ. Wheresoever you turn, there is the face of God. No. But then he says, if the mirror does not reflect, how is that? It is because the rust has not been cleared from its face. And then he says, oh my friends, listen to this tale. In truth, it is the very essence of our inward state. And then he gives the first discourse. Bismillah. So we'll close this morning session summarizing this story and its symbolism. First, to say there are 12 discourses in the book 1 of the Mathnawi. Rumi does not label the discourses. He kind of hides them in the structure. There are numerous headings of sections in the Mathnawi, but the discourses themselves are kind of hidden within that. And it's like he purposely hid the structure of the Mathnawi, just like Allah has hidden the meaning of things in the outward forms, such that only those who prepare themselves can understand its meaning. And Rumi gives this beautiful analogy that if an ant crawls on like a beautiful carpet like this one, it just sees chaos. Purple, green, yellow, orange, white. No rhyme, no reason, just chaos. He says, but were a falcon to fly above the carpet, it would see this beautiful pattern. He said, we all have an ant self. It's like, why is this happening? What does this mean? What's going on? It's all chaos. But we have the falcon self, the spirit, which has perspective and can perceive meaning and can perceive the patterns and can perceive the wisdom of things. We have to activate this, and then we can have this royal falcon, Shahbaz, the name Shahbaz, like Malcolm, Allah yarhamuhu. It means the royal falcon, Shahbaz. No. And we all have this royal falcon nature. So then he says, listen to this tale. In truth, it is the very marrow of our inward state. So there's 12 discourses, and they are in sets of 4. First 4, second 4, last 4.